So here we have the BenQ EX2780Q monitor, which I recently purchased for the dual use of a home office display and a gaming monitor for the Xbox Series X. Overall, I think it is a solid choice for those uses, given that there are no HDMI 2.1 monitors currently available. Like many of you out there, I went with a computer display instead of a TV for the Xbox Series X because I need a smaller form factor. I need this display to be placed on a desk, and I need to be able to transport it easily in a car that may be loaded with other packages. If I didn't have a form factor constraint, I would have chosen the Samsung Q80T television for my Xbox Series X display. 3 other reasons that I selected this monitor are availability, cost, and performance with the Xbox Series X game console. If time were not an issue, I would have waited a year or so for the HDMI 2.1 monitors to become available. They have the connection bandwidth needed for 4K resolution, HDR, and 120Hz refresh rate. But alas, I needed a monitor immediately. For those of you sensitive to cost, even when HDMI 2.1 monitors become widely available, you might still choose a monitor like this BenQ here, either new or used, due to its affordable price in comparison to the upcoming HDMI 2.1 monitors. I will eventually sell this monitor and purchase an HDMI 2.1 monitor, so it didn't make sense for me to purchase a very expensive gaming monitor right now. I purchased this monitor from B&H Photo for $450 before tax. It had free shipping and it arrived in a week. Even though this monitor is 1440p and not 4K, I'm not in a big rush to replace it because most Xbox Series X and PS5 games cannot maintain 120 FPS at 4K resolution, which I'll get into. The most important decision factor for me is performance, specifically performance when connected to the Xbox Series X. You might look at this monitor and not be that impressed with its specs, like its 5 millisecond pixel response time and 144Hz refresh rate. However, not all gaming monitors with 144Hz refresh rate or above can work at 120Hz on the Xbox Series X over the HDMI connection. They might have to drop down to only 60Hz when connected via HDMI. Given that the Xbox Series X is so new, this was one of the very few monitors I knew for a fact worked with the Xbox Series X with 1440p, 120Hz refresh rate, and HDR enabled over HDMI. BenQ states that it's compatible with the Xbox Series X on its website at the aforementioned settings. From a technical standpoint, this monitor does have very solid input lag because it is a 140Hz panel running at 120 on the Series X. It'll basically beat any 60Hz monitor on input lag. I've noticed that my movement feels slightly more crisp and responsive in games like Apex Legends with this monitor. The other monitor that made it to my finalist list was the Asus VG2780Q1A, but I couldn't verify its level of compatibility with the Xbox Series X at the time I needed to make a purchase decision. The primary negative from a performance standpoint with this BenQ monitor is that it is only a 1440p resolution monitor, given that it uses HDMI 2.0, not HDMI 2.1. However, based on your usage, this might not be a major negative. With a 27-inch monitor, you begin to tell the difference between 1440p and 4K resolution at a distance from the screen of about 2.5 feet. When I game, I'm about 2 feet from my monitor, so I can actually tell the difference between 4K and 1440p, but it's not a huge difference. Second, I mostly play competitive online multiplayer games like Apex Legends and Warzone. Those types of games are not going to have a 4K resolution and 120 FPS on the Xbox Series X. They are likely going to be either 4K at 60 FPS or 1440p at 120 FPS. As a serious online gamer, I will definitely be selecting the second option, 1440p at 120 FPS, because the lower resolution is more than made up for in the many advantages of 120 FPS gaming. For example, there is much lower input latency and it's easier to track targets at 120 FPS. There's a YouTube video by Digital Foundry that corroborates my analysis. It found that in Warzone, the Series X at 4K resolution can maintain an FPS at above 60 FPS, but below 120. So in all likelihood, if you want to maintain a solid 120 FPS, you will likely have to drop down to 1440p from 4K resolution in Warzone. Now, Apex Legends is a less graphically demanding game than Warzone, but I doubt it will be able to output a stable 120 FPS at a true 4K resolution. 4K games on the Xbox Series X use dynamic resolution to keep the FPS from dropping, so 4K games are not always a true 4K on the Xbox Series X or even the PS5. So even if I had an HDMI 2.1 monitor, I would not be able to take advantage of the extra resolution in my primary use case. Other than the resolution, the other negatives of this monitor are that it has no height adjustment for the stand and you can't flip it into portrait mode, although you can add those capabilities with a separately purchased monitor stand that is compatible. The pixel response time on this monitor is not at an elite level, nor is the color reproduction, but given its availability, price, and other positive attributes, overall I think this is a solid choice for the Xbox Series X and home office. FYI, the best settings for this monitor in my opinion are with HDR set to cinema, AMA set to premium, and the BI eye care set to off. If you don't have it set to these settings, the colors are going to look either washed out or too warm. I've had this monitor for a few weeks now and I'm happy with the purchase. I have not noticed any technical issues given that it is a 144Hz monitor running at 120. It performs well with the Xbox Series X as expected. With this monitor, you will probably be able to take advantage of all the major next-gen console features when playing competitive online multiplayer games like Warzone and Apex Legends. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video.